The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome once again, folks. I'm Chris Temple, editor and publisher of the National Investor, and in just a few minutes you're going to meet Greg Beischer. He is the CEO of Alaska Energy Metals. We're going to give you a profile on that company today. But before I bring him on directly, I want to play a quick introductory video that they've had professionally done. Very nice, talking about their Nikolai Project, talking about nickel. But you're going to learn that this is a story even beyond nickel and even beyond the nickel that's needed for battery metals. One of the things that you'll hear, especially from Greg, that's a sad reminder to us as Americans, is that almost 100% of the nickel that we use every day for stainless steel, for batteries, and for other needs is imported from other countries, even though we have development-ready projects in the U.S. and now an exciting exploration project with Alaska Energy Metals. So stay tuned and I'll be right back.
Demand for nickel is set to soar because of its new use in rechargeable lithium-ion electric vehicle batteries. Alaska Energy Metals believes it has a very large nickel deposit and is working to prove it. If we are right, our shareholders will do really well.
My name is Greg Beischer. I'm the president and CEO of Alaska Energy Metals. I've been an exploration geologist ever since 1987. Worked all over North America, but settled here in Alaska in 1995. Nickel's a really interesting metal. Its main use is for the production of stainless steel, but things have changed recently. With the advent of electric vehicles, nickel is becoming in huge demand. Lithium-ion batteries actually have more nickel in them than lithium. If we are going to adopt electric vehicles across our entire country, across North America, across Europe, then we're going to need our own secure domestic source of nickel and other battery metals. Alaska Energy Metals is a recently formed company. Our main asset is the Nikolai Project in central Alaska. Here we've got what we believe is a very large deposit of nickel, plus the other elements: cobalt, copper, chrome, iron, and platinum and palladium, even some gold. We're going to have to prove that, and that work's already underway with the drilling campaign. All right, we're standing on the Eureka zone of mineralization. Right now you can see our drill in the background is drilling a hole at about a 60-degree angle down into the rock. So the zone is about 300 meters thick here, and it goes in this direction almost 12 kilometers. So this could be an absolutely giant deposit of nickel mineralization.
So this is really a ground floor opportunity to invest in a company that could help with the raw materials America needs for an energy transition. We've recently raised $9 million.
And that cash will allow us to make it to the first big milestone, which we target to be 1 billion pounds of nickel in the ground. We'll do the metallurgical surveys with that money. We'll do geophysical and other surveys looking for higher grade portions of the mineralization. But at the end of the milestone, we'll calculate a maiden inferred resource. It's a small share count, and it's very tightly held, and therefore leveraged for solid share price increase when we deliver good news. America needs a domestic source of battery metals if it's going to meet the challenge of an energy transition to electric vehicle batteries. If we're correct in proving up the resource, this could be a nickel deposit that is very valuable for America's energy transition.
Alaska Energy Metals, you can find on the Toronto Venture Exchange. It's under the symbol AEMC. On the OTCQB, it's AKEMF. And that allows you, of course, these days in the US to be able to buy the shares of the company just about as easily as you can pretty much anything else. Now, before I bring on Greg, who you got a little bit of a taste of the story, in that video that we just showed you, a couple of quick housekeeping things. First of all, Greg and or myself might be making some forward-looking statements as the regulators define those things. So we want to let you know that anything of this nature entails some risk. Everybody does their best to bring things to fruition, but you need to do some due diligence, do your homework. And on that score, of course, we urge you to keep up with both ourselves and with Alaska Energy Metals directly. Get on their mailing list, follow them on social media, follow us, because we'll regularly put out news and updated commentary on the company as well. In addition to that, concurrently with this video starting to be distributed in the month of January, I'm also putting out a special issue that deals with battery metals, strategic metals, what I think is going to be a rolling and evolving bull market for commodities generally for the years ahead. And Alaska Energy Metals is going to be one of the featured companies in there, especially since the nickel and copper and other things that they hope to one day mine up in southern Alaska are made in the good old US of A. And that's going to be an increasingly important part of the story going forward as well. So if you're not on my mailing list already, make sure that you get on it. You'll be getting that free of charge, along with a couple other special issues I have coming up. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Greg Beischer. Greg, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me.
Same to you, Chris. Always great to see you.
Well, folks, I've known Greg for a lot of years, and most of that time he was the CEO of a little prospect generator called Millrock Resources. And those of you who have got some knowledge of how natural resource industries work, there's a lot of companies out there that find their niche as ones that are kind of the earliest movers, if you will, in a prospective property, be it for gold, base metals, or whatever the case may be. And they usually operate on a shoestring, to try and keep small, tight budgets. Hopefully out of a portfolio of projects they have, one or two pay off, and then that makes everything worthwhile. And Greg and Millrock were, plodding along for a lot of years following that model. But less than a year ago, Greg, you announced officially the name change to Alaska Energy Metals. And not completely, because you've acquired another property since then, which we'll talk about, but you pretty much a year ago went all in on what is called the Nikolai Project in southern Alaska. Here's the location of it on the screen. And part of the reasons for that, frankly, as you explained to me when you and I got together last a couple of months ago down in New Orleans, I didn't fully appreciate until we actually did get to sit down and you kind of looked at, here, dummy, look at this. This is what we're doing. You get this yet? And I said, okay, now I get it. And this is a project actually, and I'd love for you to give some of the history on this for the folks, Greg, that you knew about way back in the 90s. And when you had an opportunity to scarf this up, you did just that. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts of Nikolai shortly, but tell us about that backstory and your long experience with this project.
I really do have a long history with this project now, Chris. My first career as a young geologist was with a company called Inco, which at the time was the world's largest nickel mining company that operated all over the world. And they moved me all around, and I explored primarily for nickel in lots of different spots. But in 1995, the company asked me to move to Alaska to explore this exact same spot that I'm now exploring again. And the reason that they wanted me to come here is that the global targeting team had noticed geologic similarities between the Nikolai area and the Norilsk area of Siberia, which Norilsk has probably the largest accumulation of nickel metal on Earth, even bigger than Sudbury, Ontario, where Inco initially came from. So it was just a grassroots idea at the time, and they sent me up here, and I did 5 years of work on the project with a big team. And in fact, we found nickel, but we didn't find nickel like at Norilsk. It wasn't so high grade, so rich, but it was nevertheless a large deposit. But eventually, Inco walked away. But I stayed in Alaska, and I've been here ever since, exploring all over this great state. And then a couple of years ago, I saw the opportunity to reacquire all the mineral rights to the Nikolai Project, and yeah, made a conscious decision then to focus all our effort and raise the money to explore this project 100%. So it is kind of going all in, but I know this project's worth it. We've got the right hand here.
Well, that's neat, and there's a couple of moving parts to this that make this attractive that we want to get into. First of all, of course, as I alluded to a minute ago, um, this is a made in America project of a number of potential project, we should say, of a number of different metals that we're going to need ever more of in our own backyard in the years to come, and which we really can't account for right now. So I know that this is chiefly a nickel project, but you also have other base metals that you found as well. Is that correct?
There's quite a variety of metals in the deposit, accessory amounts of copper and cobalt, platinum and palladium, iron and chrome. We don't know which of all of those metals will be able to recover, but certainly nickel is the primary commodity amongst that basket.
Neat. And of course, for those that haven't followed the story very much, and I'll have more of this in that written report coming up that I mentioned, as well as in some other press in the weeks and months ahead. But nickel is another metal that the U.S. at least imports most of it. We shouldn't be in that place, but unfortunately, because of bad policy, as I see it, we are. That's going to evolve as time goes on. But one of the cool stories I think about this, and some people who have followed this know that in states like Minnesota, where you've got two world-class base metal properties, they're both pretty much mothballed right now until we get a change of policy and then in that particular location. But Alaska was just recently rated, and you and I have shared some information on this, is pretty much at the top. I mean, even beyond Nevada of any of the states in the US. And more so, Greg, I think it's accurate to say that for all of the folklore and the old stories of people moving up the chain from California farther north and then ultimately to Alaska and did a lot of placer mining, got a lot of the easy gold. The majority of that state, which is a very friendly one for mining, has hardly been scratched up to now, has it?
It really hasn't. And honestly, Chris, that's one of the main reasons I've chosen to live here in Alaska. I just see so much potential. You know, it's a huge landmass. For our Canadian friends, for comparison, it's a landmass about the size of Quebec, an enormous piece of real estate. In fact, it's effectively 20% of the landmass of the lower 48 United States. And yet, if you were to compare Quebec with Alaska, it's probably 1,000 or 10,000 times more well explored in Quebec than Alaska. So that just means to me there's a lot of opportunity for discovery here in Alaska.
Now, back to, and we're going to get into some of the specifics of the location and so forth, but back to the Nikolai Project specifically, Greg, one of the things that you explained to me when you and I sat down and we did a deep dive into the project when we met in New Orleans at Brian London's conference at the beginning of November, was how even though it might not be as high grade as Norilsk and Sudbury and some other places, you've got an immense area that's almost uniformly graded as far as nickel and copper, and that's highly unusual. Tell us a little bit about that and about that dynamic. And then if you would, you actually did put out an updated resource estimate based on both some of your own recent work and drilling and a lot of the historical information you were able to get with the project.
Right. Well, the thing is, Chris, rich nickel deposits are very rare. I mean, they only occur in very specific types of rocks that are not well distributed over the surface of the earth. So they're uncommon deposits to begin with. And, they don't show up very often despite the exploration efforts of geologists to find them. In fact, the last major massive sulfide nickel discovery was almost 30 years ago now, the Voisey's Bay deposit in Labrador. So it's not like our industry can just turn up the heat and find a whole bunch more nickel to meet what is likely to be a huge new demand. And so I believe that our mining industry will have to mine lower concentration deposits where the nickel is distributed out over a larger volume of rock. So not as rich, but if the rock is mineralized in a homogeneous sort of way, where it's a large volume of rock that's uniformly mineralized. Large mining companies really like this because they can see that there will be a long mine life, decades of mine life, with very similar concentration as each year goes by. And so they can rely on it and then really make good money in those years when the metal prices are high. So it should be, I believe that globally, the mining industry is going to be mining this next generation of nickel deposits. They're large tonnage, lower grade deposits. And so we have one that's quite continuous, it's thick, and it's uniformly mineralized over a long distance.
And that's the Eureka Zone, which we have up on the screen here as well. One of the two major chunks of ground that you have up in southern Alaska. I found it intriguing because I didn't know who they were until you explained it to me, who your neighbor to the north is that you actually did a little transaction with recently. Tell us about them.
Well, yeah, it is interesting to have this particular neighbor. They came along after us, but it's a company called Cobalt, which interestingly was initially underwritten by some very prominent people whose names you'll recognize as Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. And the idea was that the geologists would use artificial intelligence to analyze the entire world to identify the very best places to look for nickel and cobalt, because I think those gentlemen recognize that those two metals are absolutely key for an electrical energy expansion or transition. And so they recognize that this is potentially the choke point. The nickel is the choke point for electric vehicle adoption. And so they funded these geologists and they searched the whole world over. And this is one of the spots they picked. But unfortunately, they were a little bit too late because we had already acquired the mineral rights to the best ground. But they do have some interesting prospects. And we had some information about their prospects that we've now sold to them, in fact. And since they really are a data-driven company, I think they'll make very good use of that data.
Well, and what's cool about that too is that the involvement of people like that right next door to you, ultimately, all else being equal, should bring more eyes on you as well, Greg, and on Alaska Energy Metals. You know, what they're doing with looking for nickel and cobalt is not unlike Elon Musk's public pleas for give me more lithium, as well. We all know that all of these things, for all of the promises that have been made about the energy transition and so forth, that the work is only just beginning. to figure out where all of the building blocks for this energy transition are going to come from. So
Right.
you're
You know,
kind
it's interesting. Elon Musk once quipped that, well, really, we should call these graphite nickel batteries, not lithium ion batteries,
true.
because there's a lot more nickel in the battery than there is lithium. And I know as a geologist that nickel's a lot more difficult to find than lithium. So
Yep.
I think cobalt and its backers are right that nickel and cobalt will be the metals that really could be the ones that trip us up in America as the
Yeah.
ones that we really need for the batteries for electric vehicles and for long-term storage solutions for electrical energy.
Yeah. Before we move on to Canwell, Greg, and we're recording this on January the 4th. You just put out news on Canwell this morning that we're going to get to specifically, but tell us about that last resource estimate that you put out for the Eureka Zone and how you are looking at in 2024 at perhaps adding to that.
Yeah, so the Nikolai Project is composed really of two parts, the Eureka block and the Canwell block. And that Eureka, we've already established that there's a large nickel resource. We had historical drill holes that allowed us to calculate two initial deposits or resources that total over 1.5 billion pounds of nickel in the ground at a concentration of about 0.34% nickel equivalent. So that's the value of the nickel with the accessory cobalt and copper added to it. So that's a great start. And we'll add to that very soon the 8 drill holes that we drilled in summer of 2023. And that should very significantly increase the size of the lower grade deposits that we have. But as a geologist, there's a saying that grade is king, and it's true. You're always going to have better economics if you have high grade mineralization, and there's signs of it at surface in various places, but particularly on our Canwell block of claims. That high grade mineralization at surface has been known for a while. We've sampled it again, confirmed, yeah, these are really strong values of nickel and copper, and not just that, but very strong grades of platinum and palladium, and even the more rare platinum group elements like osmium and iridium and rhodium. So a very valuable material. And if we can find even a 5 million ton deposit of that sort of grade, would be an extremely rich standalone ore body. But if we can find even small pods, it really helps with the economics of developing a large bulk tonnage operation. So we're very keen to find high-grade mineralization, and we did a lot of geophysical prospecting in summer 2023 at Canwell, and there's some really exciting drill targets that emerged out of that work. So very strong geophysical signs that high-grade nickel mineralization that we observe at surface continues below surface. And we'll test that with core drilling in 2023. And it could be an absolute game changer if we discover high-grade massive sulfides to go along with the lower grade deposit we've already established.
And so that news you put out this morning is going to lead to a few specific drill targets, which you do plan on doing this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But let's be fair too to the Eureka Zone, because a grade of 0.34, and especially given that pretty much all of that is at surface, correct? It starts at surface. That's not too shabby. I mean, for decent open pit nickel operations on the planet, that's not exactly low grade.
Right. Well, the simple way I look at it is that our mining industry globally now is mining copper deposits that are as low as 0.35.
Right.
But nickel's 3 times the price of copper. So just on the face of it, it should make good money.
Yeah, now moving on, as we wind things down, before I get to your Quebec acquisition that you made late in the year this past year, I want to talk a little bit about more specifics for 2024 at Nikolai. So you're going to be doing more drilling at Canwell, and you're going to incorporate some holes from 2023 and maybe some more drilling as well in 2024 at Eureka.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of news flow, we'll publish an update to our resource calculation at Eureka, and it should expand it substantially. We've got samples in the laboratory to determine how much of the metals we would recover in a standard sort of milling operation. That'll be an important series of numbers and information to have. And so lots of news coming from Nikolai, but yes, we plan a very aggressive drilling program in 2024 to further expand the known deposit, but at the same time, search for high-grade deposits and pods of mineralization.
And the known deposit as it sits now, I'm sharing another slide from your corporate presentation, you're already one of the largest early stage resources for nickel in North America.
I think we must be, Chris. There's no really good numbers on resources for other nickel deposits in the United States. In fact, there's very few nickel deposits in the U.S. And in fact, you know, as I mentioned, nickel only occurs in very specific rock types, which really only occur in Alaska, maybe a little bit in Oregon, Montana, and Minnesota,
Yeah,
and
you got the
Michigan.
ring around Lake Superior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's really it. And so I think, yes, there's some good deposits in Minnesota, but I'm pretty sure that Nikolai will quickly become one of the largest, if not the largest, in America.
Nice. Well, we'll be looking forward to that as it evolves, God willing. Quickly, as we again wind down, you're not a one asset company any longer. I'm starting to get my head around what you've got in Quebec, but you made an acquisition that brought some cash into the company as well back in the fall. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this one was really a no-brainer, Chris. We bought a company that had cash in the till, but it also had a prospect that, again, I was familiar with from decades ago with my work at Inco. I had been stationed in Quebec for a little while. In fact, right before I was moved to Alaska, and I worked on this particular area. I was really interested in it, and well, it's come full circle again. I've got the prospect back, and we're very glad to have it. And it'll be a secondary project for now. We'll move it forward sequentially through the exploration process, but look to drill it probably in 2025.
Nice, nice. Well, you know, it's a time, folks, when there's not been nearly enough attention paid to a lot of these key metals. Nickel, of course, is used not only for electric vehicle batteries, but it's used in construction industries and for infrastructure and so forth. There's gaping holes in what needs to be done and funded for those as well. So you don't need to be bullish on a lot of these metals looking forward based only on the energy transition. You've got infrastructure building and rebuilding the planet over that I don't care which of these commodities you look at, all of the demand charts are all lower left to upper right going forward, every single one of them. And there's just not enough of them out there. So the potential that exists, especially with Nikolai, for what could be a world-class size and scale, what could be a world-class size and scale of an open pitable deposit, maybe with that high grade kicker Canwell. That's pretty compelling stuff. And your profile in the market, Greg, has been a fair bit better since you changed the company from Millrock to Alaska Energy Metals early last year. We could certainly say that the stock chart looks better than by far than the average resource junior. Not that all the rest of them deserve that fate, but at least you've got a few more eyes on yours. And I think that, a lot of that is your own telling the stories to get people to understand that even though it's early yet, this is an area with a lot of potential. And really, the state of Alaska is very friendly to mining. Give us real quick, what the pros and cons are about the specific area that you're in, because I know that when we visited on this before, there's nothing in really close proximity that would be threatened environmental wise. People, the one big negative story, I guess, out of Alaska in recent years has been Pebble. This would be a big copper and gold mine, but it's right at the headwaters of a main creek that's one of the biggest salmon runs in North America. So that doesn't have much, but you don't have a salmon run up to Nikolai.
Well, that's correct. No, there's really no fish at all. All the water draining through our project is glacial meltwater. It's very silty, fast-moving water that doesn't support fish life, never mind salmon. But that always is a hot button topic in Alaska. But fortunately, there's no salmon anywhere downstream for a very long distance from our project. So that'll make permitting easier. I think we're in a very permittable spot. There's no particularly sensitive ecological concern. There's really no people in the immediate area of our claim block. So yeah, we should be in pretty good shape for permitting, and especially since this really is an energy transition metal for the United States. I mean, the country really needs its own secure domestic supplies of these metals. Our country is really at great risk, very vulnerable right now, Chris, and particularly on nickel, where the country imports 100% of the nickel that it consumes for everything from stainless steel to aeronautical parts to defense mechanisms. It's a very widely used metal, but now it's got a whole new use. There's 64 pounds of nickel in every single electric car battery, never mind big storage type battery applications that are coming around. And I think we're fortunate that Canada is well endowed with nickel. That's where half of the nickel consumed in the United States comes from. But now Canada's building great big multi-billion-dollar electric car battery plants, and I'm not so sure all that nickel's going to keep coming to the United States from Canada. And unfortunately, the rest of the nickel the United States consumes comes primarily from Indonesia, which is largely China controlled in terms of the metals. And unfortunately, there's a very large carbon footprint to the production of that Indonesian nickel, which completely counteracts the idea of driving an electric car. If the idea is not to put carbon in the air, well, then the Indonesian nickel is not the way to do that. And so we really need to do this at home. I know that you're part of a group called Better in Your Backyard, and I absolutely agree. We've got the highest environmental standards anywhere in the world, the highest human rights standards. And so it is better to mine these raw materials right here at home and the wealth, enjoy the wealth that's created from that.
Well, for sure. And I'm glad you brought up Indonesia, because even within his own party, when President Biden was making moves recently to try and get more nickel from Indonesia rather than allow it to be mined at much greater standards with much fairer labor treatment and wages and environmental standards and a whole nine yards, he got major pushback even from within his own Democrat Party on that recently. That the time of getting cheap nickel and not caring about anybody else's backyard or cheap cobalt from the Congo and that kind of thing, those days are ending. And if all goes well with your exploration work and everything falls into place, you'll be one of the new sources down the road of sustainably mined, maybe not the best terminology for it, but properly mined nickel. You're not going to have little children mining it, in conditions that were outlawed 3 generations ago, like what goes on in some of these other countries. So, Greg, I'm excited with this project, about this project, glad to be a part of it. And folks, I got to remind you again, do some homework, check out Alaska Energy Metals Corporation, go to their website, follow them on social media, get on their mailing list, shoot them a question if you have one, or in the alternative, let me know, and I'll make sure that you get an answer from Greg. But this is one of the more intriguing and potentially very, very large scale resources looming for this key metal that we can't be without, not to mention the copper and the platinum group metals and otherwise. So, Greg, Happy New Year again. And I look forward to our crossing paths again before too many weeks or months go by. And aside from that, we'll certainly keep in touch, and I'll be happy to pass on news to folks as it comes along.
Great. Yeah, well, there's lots of news coming, Chris. I think this deposit really could be quite meaningful for our country, and I'm glad to be working on it, and glad to be have you distributing the news. Yep.
Well, and I'm glad
Thanks a lot.
I'm glad I finally woke up to this, just how big a story this was, which I thank you for. So, Greg, best of luck to you, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks very much. Take care, Chris.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.